get started with the work session because Commissioner Smith must be out of here in 25 minutes.
A lunch?
A life.
You got places to be.
He's got a life.
I'm sure Denise has to have a place to be too.
They gotta go to the dump.
Okay, who wants to?
Mark, do you want to start
Yeah.
for a second?
Yep. So, Commissioners, we had our work session. We discussed with Tonganoxie, and we discussed 222nd, what some of the options are, financing potential, and whatnot. As you're also aware, we have been working on a development agreement about how, if this were in the county, how we would treat any development that would come in and how improvements off-site, which is this, that's what this would be considered an off-site improvement of the industrial park. Working with Bill and staff, we already had the kind of an engineer's estimate. They went through and reviewed it, made sure it was as accurate as it can be. Again, it's an estimate. I had Bill evaluate what our expenditure on that roadway would be over a certain time period, because according to our new development agreement, that's what the county would participate in off-site improvements for. So we've come up with those two items. So really, just wanted to update you on those. Bill can kind of run through that if you want more detail, and then discuss from a county's perspective how we move forward. And that's really, I think, that's our side from staff.
So what we did is we took a look at the 10-year maintenance cycle of what we would spend on maintaining both Kansas Avenue and 222nd Street. Obviously, those are two different surface types, Kansas Avenue being gravel. We had previously put out a number of approximately $7,500 per gravel road mile per year. That was been several years ago now, so we increased that amount. So if you take that over a 10-year period, you're looking at approximately $80,000 worth of maintenance that may occur on that roadway from a gravel road perspective. Portion of that being the first half mile, and then the next quarter mile, one being the developed industrial park in Tonganoxie, and then the next being the 80 acres lying to the east of it. The city has annexed that gravel road to the center of the roadway. That annexation was post to our interlocal agreement that expires in July with the city of Tonganoxie and is not included as an identified boundary road location. And so the maintenance of that, albeit has been done by the county, is not defined within our interlocal agreement. And then the blacktop portion of the roadway, we would normally chip and seal that every 3 years. It is a little over a half mile of roadway, and so you would be looking at about $50,000 worth of chip and seal, and then we would add any patching in on that. So we're approximately somewhere in that $125,000 to $150,000 range is what we would spend on Kansas Avenue and 222nd Street over the next 10-year period.
So you're not using 4 years on Haydite chip seals?
We've been going 3 on high traffic areas, and then longer in some of the secondary roads that we've been doing in the subdivisions, and maybe even some of the new dust abatements. We're not going to do them on 3 year, but with the traffic volume there, we would probably try to hit it in 3 years.
And this interlocal agreement runs out on July of this year.
Yes.
And are we gaining any traction on getting a legal opinion on the cities of second classes and county roads?
Bill, can you flip that microphone up down there? It
This
doesn't
one?
do much good aiming at the table.
Probably should lean up. So.
Let's see, I failed it.
Well, Commissioner, a city in Kansas gains its classification upon population thresholds.
Mm-hmm.
Some cities of the first class are more or less grandfathered in because their population has dropped below what is now considered to be the threshold. But I believe the city of Tonganoxie's population would basically make them a second-class city.
They changed classes.
Okay.
And, they got the picture of the governor and everything.
There is, and well, we have another city that probably may want to consider that, but
What about it's opting out, like Baser's claiming they can
Home rule.
uniform laws cannot be opted out of.
What are they talking about then?
I'd have to examine exactly what they're saying. before I can-
Definition.
Well, that's what came up at our
Right.
meeting.
Right, and that's why I was wanting to get a straight answer, whether it's an AG
The
opinion or what.
population threshold that they.
Okay, we do have staff working on that, but that's really not part of this
Okay.
conversation.
All right, but you
Well, but if we don't do anything till after our interlocal agreement expires with them,
Those would be considered boundary roads. I mean, that's the definition of a boundary road. So we will have to have some agreement going forward on these roads and other roads around Tonganoxie. So there has to be some kind of an agreement
Okay.
because it's a boundary road. And statutorily, even doesn't matter classification of cities, population, nothing. On boundary roads,
Right.
you have to have some kind of an agreement. And this is why Commissioner Culbertson has brought up we need to have annexations handled differently going forward. We got that.
we got it, we got it. So
What was the percentage of roadway that, like, of this whole route, what's the percentage that would be considered in Tonganoxie?
Approximately 40%.
Now, that's 40% of half the road?
Well, of the total lane miles. So
Okay.
of the roadway, there's a 1,200 or less, maybe 1,000 feet on the south end that is entirely in the county. And then as you go up, there's about maybe 1,000 or less feet on the east end of Kansas Avenue that would be entirely in the county on the gravel road. So if they owned to the center, it's not quite 50-50 because we have the end on each end that is entirely within the county. So I would estimate that of the total area of the road in question, 40% of it is within the city limits and 60% of it approximately would be in the county. I did not do it. I did not have GIS calculate that number, but that would be, sitting here today, my closest estimate.
Okay.
So one more point on that, and then we'll get back. But on when you're talking about updating these interlocal agreements for the maintenance part, where I assume we're going to try to get Tonganoxie to participate in that.
Well, there's two options, right? So either we come to an agreement and we maintain the full width of certain roads, and they maintain the full width of certain roads, or we maintain only half a road. So I'm assuming anybody reasonable, we will come to some kind of an agreement. I don't.
Okay.
I think the bigger kicking and screaming is going to be that we will then no longer be maintaining roadways that are fully within their city limits.
So how successful do you think a campaign would be that we started, because I look at these as mistakes on the county side.
Mhm.
What if we started a campaign to go in and find all these half roads and either have the city annex the rest of it right away or de-annex half the right of way? Just clean them up.
You mean we take over the whole right of way?
Well, they either take over our half or we take over their half just to clean these up.
Get it clarified.
Yeah, we need to not
but
have
that-
any more half roads.
But that's not to our advantage.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of the cities would
Well,
prefer
that's
you
what
do
I'm-
that.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
but
saying.
they would prefer that we go ahead and take it all the way over.
I don't-
the
I
other
don't
What I'm
know
saying
that
is
we can
instead of an
legally do
interlocal
that.
agreement, what I'm
Is that
saying
right?
is instead of an interlocal agreement on, okay, we have two half roads. You maintain all of this one and we maintain all of this one. Instead of doing that, just clean up the deed work.
Change the annexations.
Yes, you own this whole road now and we own this whole road now. We'll trade you half of that road for half of this road.
Oh,
That way it's
now
cut and
that's-
dry.
And you could be doing that as you go along and update these interlocal
Instead of
agreements.
making MOUs and saying, well, we know we own half of that one.
We
you
did
own
that
half.
Lansing thing that worked out well. We took over, for the most part, took over the thing. McIntyre did the same.
No, Lansing stood tall. I mean,
Anytime-
I've been through that. 24, 11 South,
Yeah.
DeSoto.
No,
Because
I'm
we're going to
saying-
keep getting in an argument. They're going to say, well, that's got a tube in it that's 50 years old and this one don't or something like that. So just clean them up and say, you own all this road, we own all this road.
We had so many issues before we did that. That was just a smart thing.
That,
I think the issue with that is it's the same process to get to that point as the interlocal agreement.
It will.
actually, it's probably more difficult.
It probably is, but
Because in an interlocal agreement, we can say, this stretch of road from here to here. In an annexation situation, you have to go out and have that surveyed, you have to have a legal come up with, you have to do a public hearing.
it's
Regardless
not easier,
whether
but it's done.
whether the city's annexing or de-annexing, it's a much more difficult
I
process to
agree,
do that.
In
but
this-
then it's done.
And
Then
it, well,
you
it's,
don't have to go
it's
back
done
over.
for a period, because in this situation, Tonganoxie is going to grow south. They built the sewer interceptor south, so they're going to continue to come off of that, I believe. That's their intention with the city limits. So the areas north of Kansas Avenue that are currently in the county at some point will be annexed. I know some of the ones on the east end, like the east end of 222nd Street, is zoned for high-density
Right.
apartments. And then at some point, the 80 acres going south that's on the east side of the current industrial park, that's the planned industrial park space. So
But Kansas Avenue is large tracts of ground on the north side, you know, even as far as the mobile home park. That's
We
large
just need
tract
them
of
over
ground.
the other half.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as being able to annex,
I wish
it
I
would
could
be
do
voluntary.
No, I'm just
we
laughing.
could transfer rights to
At
these.
no cost to you. Here you go.
Yeah.
You were gonna let you have this.
Quit claim.
This whole
Our
first
part of
year.
it.
Right, that's why I said we just,
Okay.
go.
But currently on these
Abandon the right of
on
way.
the roads we're talking about, nobody is applying for any funding, correct?
No.
Grants.
I spoke to George probably
Commerce.
2 weeks ago, and no, when we reached out to the city and approached them when we were going to apply for the base grant, and we were asking the cities, and we ended up partnering on the first application with Lansing, we were told that they did not have the funding capacity to split the 20% 50-50 with us, and we did not apply for that grant. Based on our conversations with the city at that time. So we offered that avenue to them. I did discuss that again with George here like 2 weeks ago, and he was at the, he was throwing out just spitballing different funding scenarios to try to get the first $2 million in a viable position to apply for funding through the base grant. But they want to apply for base grant funding for their sewer system. And that's what they applied for, the expansion of their lagoon field. And so, I mean, you'd have to choose, even if we partner with them, what is your first priority and what is your second priority to the base grant? And the base grant is the only funding stream that I know of right now that we could apply for. Now, second to that, we could apply for Kansas cost share funds. But since we just were awarded $1 million, there'll probably be at least 2 cycles, because they do those every 6 months. It'll be 18 months to 24 months before we can probably claw our way back up. But just like in that, we should apply for them now as soon as we can and be in that queue, because we applied for County Route 40 or 30. County Route 30 4 times through the cost share
Right.
program, once through Senator Moran's office, and once at the Mid-America Regional Council for STP funds. So it was our 6th application that we were successful on, and we have not applied for any funding on this road, and we can't apply for funding until we have an agreement with the city of Tonganoxie. And in that agreement, unlike we did with Baser on 155th Street, really we should have an agreement ahead of time with how are we going to pay for the remaining portion. So that way we don't get $1 million grant and have $1 million to come up with. It's not in our CIP currently,
No.
and then the city says we can only contribute $150,000 now that we got the grant. You know, we don't have $850,000 set aside for the project. So
There's not going to be ARPA funds sitting around.
Right, that's gone.
Well,
and they reference back to the $400,000 that was provided back to the county, and that was provided to the Port Authority. And at the Port Authority's suggestion, we applied for that. We applied for funding and got grant funding for the regional transportation plan. So we used that $400,000, not in its entirety, but $250,000 of it or something, in order to pay for our portion of through the sales tax. That went back into the 171 fund, and then a portion went to Lansing, and a portion went to the regional transportation plan. So that funding is also no longer.
We did talk about sending a letter from the commissioners and trying to get Tonganoxie to send a letter to the Port Authority. They do have a amount in their reserves of about over $700,000 that deems that this is the largest industrial development in southern Leavenworth County or Leavenworth County, period, in the last 20 years, that would be appropriate for a good deal of that money to be dedicated to that. I
I
think,
still
you know,
interject is the same thing that I said during that meeting is that they should have made consideration of all of that when they were talking to Hills and before they gave up the whole, you know,
10-year tax
because,
rate.
you know, the back tax abatement, because, you know, the bottom line is that although it's a great property tax generating facility, there's no sales tax that will be able to be collected from it. And it's abated for 10 years. And in that 10 years, it's not like they're selling a product out of it so that there can be taxes collected. I mean, it's for that 10 years, it's a tax absorbing.
Except for the schools, they are going to be paying
Well,
school
but that's
taxes,
not
you know.
that's not for infrastructure.
county,
That's
yeah.
not for the
Unless we
county.
make it
And-
a school zone.
and we weren't, but we were not even consulted. The respect wasn't even there to say, is there anything we're missing here? Is there something that we need to make certain that we address in doing this? And not only on that project, but then another one that came around, we were not even included to have the discussions to say, is there an impact? And that's the latest announcement. How is this going to impact the county roads?
I agree with you. I think
And-
there should be more communication.
Right, but I don't think that a lack of communication doesn't translate to we have to absorb all the expense of it.
I agree, but we do know that the Port Authority is economic development, and this is a major, I mean, I think that is something we should look at as a source of funds.
So
But I'm
are
not
you
going to pick
saying
and choose
being
what we tell them they need to
Port
do. They need to make
Authority's
those
a
decisions.
quasi-government, they could borrow the money to fix this road?
Say that again?
The Port Authority is a quasi-government agency. You're saying, and they can borrow money?
I'm not saying.
Are you saying they could borrow the money to do this road?
No. I'm
Oh,
saying
okay.
that they have a reserve of over $700,000, that maybe $500,000 or $600,000 of that could be dedicated to this project, and that would be a suggestion that the commissioners could.
I think that I
Give
want to
them-
stay out of not suggesting to them how they do that. I think that if the Tonganoxie wants to approach them and ask for them to, that's fine. They can make that request, but I think that we should stand back and allow that organization to do what we have appointed them to do and make those decisions without pressure from us. That's just,
Well, it's the money that came from Leavenworth County.
That's
And
right.
this is the largest
But we gave-
development. It's a source of funds. Why don't we want to
then
use
why
it?
did we appoint people to a port authority?
Well, they're supposed to represent us.
No, not the entire, they're supposed to,
Our
they have.
representatives.
But I'm just disagreeing that I think that we need to stand back and allow their decision-making as to what they feel is the most appropriate way, and I think they need to figure out what they want to do with the money that's sitting there. But I don't think that we should apply pressure that tells them how they must do that.
Well, I mean, we're going to have to differ on that. because
Well, I'm not willing to sign that letter.
Well,
I'll put that
so-
right.
So, if this road needs a total rehab, which it does, access to the park.
Well, you'd have to get a temporary access point on Kansas Avenue if you were going to do it and do it in two phases, or you'd have to run a traffic signal, a solar traffic signal or something. And they won't probably agree to that, but you'll have to do it in some phasing in order to accomplish a project, and that will increase the cost a little bit because you're going to be building half the road, whether it's the north half up to Kansas and then the south half down to County Route 1 or east lane, west lane, but it'll be a problem. Access will be a problem during the duration. of the
So do you
project.
think, I mean, you're saying it would see something you'd have to apply for KDOT to have a temporary access to Kansas Avenue?
I think that we'd have to at least explore if that's an option. I don't know.
It may not be an option,
It may
but,
not be an option.
you know, until somebody asks,
We don't know.
we don't know.
I was told that at one point, not under the current Metro Engineering Office, but under a previous Metro Engineering Office, that if 14th Street isn't constructed in the city of Tonganoxie that they currently talk about a lot, that Kansas Avenue, the reconnection to Kansas Avenue, was a possibility with some turning lanes and some different improvements on KDOT infrastructure that would have to be paid for locally, but it could have been at that time a viable option. Now the city is pursuing and talks about their traffic management plan, which does have an eventual new city street that wraps around the east side of the school and comes out to 24 Highway. At that point, the spacing that they're looking for. That's why they closed Kansas Avenue, was that street was going to be built at some point. And so,
They paid us to close it.
yeah, at the time that we build the project for a temporary basis, we might be able to get that if we ask, but we have to ask that question. And if we couldn't, then we're going to have to explore some sort of phasing of the project. And to Commissioner Cos's point, in my discussions with the Port Authority, regarding the Port Authority money, I told him that as a Public Works Director, I have no authority to make that suggestion, and that he stated that he was going to present that to his City Council, and if his City Council felt that it was appropriate, they would request that money and make that a proposal back to the county of just throwing out hypotheticals of maybe they request the Port Authority for $500,000, they request the county for $250,000, they contribute $250,000, and then we apply for a base grant or a cost share grant for the other $1 million. But that needs to be their proposal.
Right, that's my point, is that
Unless
we
you
do not
direct
need to
me-
own that.
unless you
That
direct-
needs to come from them.
Unless you
Well, I
as a
agree with
board,
that. I mean,
No, that's-
but I think we coordinate, I mean, they need to act.
if
Right,
you-
but not us. That's what I was trying to say, is that, no,
Until
this is
they
not,
present their.
this is not our
So,
purpose.
so Bill, if this was our project, let's say this was the industrial park was not inside the city, it's safe to say that we would have had an agreement in place that would have required the offsite improvements through the development agreement.
Development.
Yes, we would never, under our current policy that the board has directed us to, especially with, we're looking at $650 million worth of investment from the entrance of the industrial park. If you don't go clear up to Kansas Avenue, you might be looking at $1.5 million project. So you're looking at a 15/100ths of a percentage of the total investment in the infrastructure within the park, with $650 million for the $1.5 million improvement from the entrance down. We would have required a traffic study to make sure that everything was built accordingly as these, and we would have probably, I assume, working with Mark, set up some sort of callback when the next business come in, depending on their traffic generation, and we would have looked at it from a
We probably would have set up a benefit district, so
Well,
any new
We
development
would
would
also,
have
our
paid.
abatement policy would have allowed us to have enough revenue coming in to help fund some of this.
I think that's the other part of this, is that when you look at the property tax abatement, the taxes that place would have paid would far exceed the $2 million that we're talking about for construction.
And we're not asking for any private contributions. I mean, the company probably might be willing to make some kind of private contribution.
But Tonganoxie needs to make all of those inquiries, not, that's all I'm saying, is that we need
I
to
think
not,
commissioners should
no, we need to
go to
step
lunch.
back.
So I think that on our end, what we're looking for is, what was the number,
I'm
175,000?
good with that.
100,
What we would have invested in.
135,000.
So somewhere around 150, somewhere around 150,000. We'll
That's
just
very
say,
generous.
And I don't
Ryan's
have-
been out of that long.
No, I'm saying, and I don't have a problem with that level of investment that says that we will put what we would have had to invest in the past 10 years
the next
toward,
10 years.
When you take a look.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know.
I just want to make sure that that's the direction that for this road to get rebuilt, our contribution will be that.
and I think that
Okay.
that is acceptable to me.
Which would be, I think I stated $135,000, which would be a 10-year based on, and we'll run a number before we put out any documents to see, we'll put it in an Excel spreadsheet and make sure that that's an accurate number. We don't want to overfund or underfund, but we'll make sure that based on current market conditions with some
Right.
like 5% inflation, that we are covering our responsibility, but it would not exceed $150,000. It's
So-
probably more than $120,000.
What happens if this is rejected? And it opens and semi trucks come in and the road just goes
Well, they-
completely out.
And I brought that up to them,
Just take
to
the
the city,
gravel.
and and I said, you haven't even proposed anything to the county of a split of an overlay that would be a Band-Aid solution. The county's not going to go in there and overlay the entire roadway for $100,000 out of normal maintenance cycle type maintenance because the business was put in without an agreement. So I'm not, unless you direct me to as a
I agree.
board, I'm not directing the Public Works Department staff to go out and do a bunch of asphalt work that would have not been part of the.
All I know is that I watched in western Kansas, you watch and you look at all the gravel roads, that there are big, heavy trucks blasted down through there, and the
Dust
dust
control.
is flying.
Well,
I
they
mean,
use
on
dust
gravel,
control
I mean,
out
so,
Talking
well,
about feedlot.
It can handle gravel.
It can
Gravel
handle-
roads
I'm
can
saying-
handle that kind of traffic.
right, so, you know.
It's just
if
not
it-
ideal.
If it's, well, that's true, but if it comes down to it and the road just completely falls apart, take it down to gravel and say until such time as something is worked out.
We don't want that to happen.
No,
And-
but
and the-
we
the-
can say it can happen.
But the deal that I'm hearing is basic maintenance, and then they can approach the Port Authority and make the request. We will take no position.
Exactly.
But at such time as that all happens, then they'll approach us and we'll put together an agreement. Then you'll make a request for a base grant.
Well, we're going to have to do a new agreement in July anyway.
Well, that's interlocal.
Well,
Right.
that will automatically renew until we send them a notice of termination. It has an automatic renewal clause, if I'm not mistaken, David.
Are we going to send them a renewal?
I thought we already had.
I don't know, David, did you?
No, I've been not instructed to do really anything with it. But I think Bill's right. I think there may be.
Yeah, I think we talked about that a year or so ago, that we needed to send them that non-renewal.
So where does this go from here? What's the next?
So I wouldn't be comfortable stating here today in a work session more than the contribution of being more than $125,000. I will run an analysis to see if that is a low number, but I would say if you were, the way Mark described it was, we'll look at the $125,000 as our contribution as the normal 10-year maintenance of that roadway, not to exceed unless I come up with some other Excel spreadsheets, and then we'll wait and see what what the city proposes back to the county, and maybe have another work session.
I'm just throwing this out there as another option. What if we took that 100, we'll just say 150, just to be on the safe side, and you spent the 150 on the road to the industrial park entrance on 222nd by overlaying maybe some gravel shoulder or something, maybe extend that one pipe a little, and then say, hey, we'll do this, and you take it over. And we're out of it. And that way we put a Band-Aid on it to get the park opened. And
You've done the other half of the right of way.
no, they take it all. Yeah, they take it over. We would put it in upfront investment just to get it to the park, just to get the.
Where does that money come from?
Well, the concern I have is that there's still a portion of it that doesn't touch the industrial park. That's still that.
I'm going to take it all.
Yeah.
Take
Okay.
it all down to Kansas Avenue. That becomes their road. But we would get to where the parks could open,
So what are we giving up to do that?
giving up the road.
Well,
And then
then-
that gets us out. of
Then they
the-
lose our contribution.
But
We
you
wouldn't
pay-
contribute to any
where-
road project.
We're going to have to pay the contribution anyways for the 10 years of maintenance.
Yeah, but only, but
One time.
in increments, where in our budget are we going to pay for that?
We were going to make payments on the 150,000.
That was just the yearly budgetary cost, so it would have been like
Okay.
we'd have a certain hit, $7,000 a mile, say, on the gravel, and then every third year we'd have a budgetary for chip and seal.
So we overlaid that road like last year, right? We already put an overlay.
They did a little bit of patching, they did not overlay.
It was a lot of patching.
It was a lot of
It was
patching.
a huge-
It was like
It was like an overlay with patches, because
Well,
everybody
it-
you went through and did whole
So
But it was a hit or miss area. It
So how
wasn't-
much did that cost, and where did that money come
70,
I don't know.
you guys spent about 70 on
That
it.
Comes out of our operating.
It comes out of the operating budget.
And our asphalt and seal line.
from? So that might be your answer and where it comes from.
But then
Then you
what
gotta
are we
cut
giving up?
maintenance.
That's,
Well,
you
that's-
say,
I
what
mean,
are we
they're gonna
giving
have
up the
to-
maintenance on?
Just remember,
This is for us.
Last year,
Then-
they were probably had $90 left in the budget.
Yeah, like 1% or
Yeah.
less.
They had no money left, but there'd have been a snow, there'd have been a problem.
It was, Delani stated it was the lowest other than 1 year when you guys ended up with some funding shortage after '09. It was
Lowest
the lowest carryover we'd ever had.
Yeah.
And we are working
So
primarily.
anybody says Public Works has got a lot of fluff in it is wrong.
And currently this year, we're doing maintenance, a lot of our work in the north third of the county. So if we take $150,000 out of that maintenance line item, that's $150,000 that we are offsetting from the north third of the county.
Thank you, Jeff.
So,
No, I'm just saying, that's why I was asking, where's this money coming
Roll
from?
forward
That's,
that, right?
that's,
Well, I mean, no matter what we do, we got to figure. I mean, this
We'll
is
come
good
up with the money.
conversation.
Let's just say we'll come up with the money.
but do we want to use this option, or
At,
do we want?
at $150,000, that's what we're.
Oh, I'm not saying. it's good.
130,000.
I'm just saying something good.
150, and they'd actually accept the roadway.
Absolutely.
I'll come up with a way to make it.
Should we let Tonganoxie make the next move?
Well, I think that
tell them
I think
what
that there
we're
needs to be. Well, they'll probably know here in about
Two options.
2 minutes, probably,
Yeah,
because
it's on-
there's about a 2-minute delay in our video. But I think that it would be. I think we should let them know that what the commission is considering is our participation is going to be 130,000, give or take. We'll do the math. Whatever the approach is, either we can do some work right now, and they can take the road and run with it and come up with funding to do the improvements, or we can hold the 150 and try to come up with other funding, but in the end, the rest of the project is on them. If they can get the Port Authority to contribute, we support that. If not, that's up to the Port Authority. It's not up to the county, obviously.
Right.
So they need to make the next move.
Yeah,
But-
because they created this situation. We didn't. That's the way that I see it.
So they kind of have two options to think about.
Well, I'm just throwing something
Yeah.
out. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying
Well, there's 3 options. I mean, they could just say, no, we're not going to do
do
anything.
anything.
And the road will become what the road becomes.
And then we decide what we're going
Just
to do.
throw gravel down and let them.
Actually, you have to grind up. Yeah, I was going to say you have to
You have to
Yeah.
recycle it.
No, I was just.
Let's
We can
fly
go
ash
back.
down.
Let's give them. Should we communicate this to them, or should we just think that they've
No,
been
we
communicated
should
with?
we should communicate it to them.
But
Yeah.
they will know because I'm sure
They're
listening.
watching.
Yeah, this is on our work.
If they haven't, they will.
So
But
is
we'll
it,
communicate.
is it easier to get grant money if it's just a city or just a county?
Together.
Or
It's
is it
better to
together?
get it together. You get more points for partnering with another community.
And we would have to, if they go forward, we'd have to because it is partially in the county. So
And does Commerce have any funding
That's
for
what I
stuff
said,
like
yeah.
this?
So the base grant, building a stronger economy, is a commerce grant.
Well, I'd say building a road to an industrial park's building a stronger economy.
Right.
But we didn't. But at the time, they didn't have the funding set aside. They applied for funding through their sewer fees or something.
twice, yeah, their last 2 applications have been for the sewer. Not
Well,
for-
but then that's their priorities, and we can have ours too.
But we
Well,
can't
I'm
apply
just
without their
saying
agreement
that
to.
just the
Right, no,
maintenance,
I'm-
just doing maintenance on that road, you say putting a Band-Aid on, well, you need a tourniquet. 'Cause it's gotta be rebuilt. I don't see any other way around it.
Let's see what they do. Let's see what they want to do.
Okay, we'll let them know.
Grind it up, put Petromat down, I guess, and overlay it.
Shingles.
I mean, do you think
Oh,
they're
could've sold you
the
one.
base grant?
I was actually looking at a thing that they use recycled shingles to.
I mean,
As good
It's
as.
a fascinating.
I always
concept.
think
Recycled
I've got an opportunity
shingles.
to get a grant. Like,
Yeah.
But,
Work better.
say that
It's
there
our
is a
green
grant.
operation.
You're talking
Well, that's
city
why I
years
put it
down the
in.
road.
what?
If we got a grant,
If
say,
it'd be 2025 now.
Yeah, because we
2026.
don't have, that's why I said, this is,
well. and
it's
then
a
the
mess
project
that nobody
becomes 1
considered, and they
They're
should
gonna-
have, and
they're
they
gonna
would
open
have
it.
if they consulted.
Yeah. That road is
The
going to
county.
drastically
Just the
Disintegrate.
construction phase tore it up.
over
Well,
the
now we got another
as soon as they
We
open.
got 2 more constructions. Unilog's building a manufacturing facility and that WSP
Right.
company. And so we'll have an open facility with the trucks and 2 construction projects ongoing at the same time.
With the one open and Unilog.
And at the meeting with the city, one thing we did discuss was that additional 80 acres, maybe having a benefit
I'll
district.
take it.
Maybe
There, that
talking to
is
the city.
to
and-
me, as unpalatable as it may be, that's probably their best scenario.
How's it unpalatable?
Well, for the people who are out there who already started business to come in now and say, by the way, we're going to make you pay for a road. It's unpalatable to them. I'm not.
Personal responsibility is
Yeah.
unpalatable.
So But that's probably the best scenario. And then you start applying for grants, hoping to offset whatever that impact might be.
Right.
But your best bet going forward would be to set up a benefit district and make these improvements.
Go put some no commercial trucks on our half of the road.
Are we done?
You can get there, but you can't get out.
Just on our half.
We'll-
$2,000 resolution.
no, we're going to close our half of the road. Not no commercial. We're just going to close it.